Next speaker knows really well that the best way to anyone's heart is through their stomach. Tom Brossart is the digital architect for Food Building in Northeast, a destination food production hub home to Red Table Meat Company, the Lone Grazer Creamery, and Bakersfield Flour and Bread. He's also launching EaterEntrepreneur.com during his involvement with Seth Godin's Alt MBA program with the purpose of making weekly videos exploring good food and creative living. Has anybody here ever made kombucha? Okay, a few people. Good, good, good. For those of you that don't know, kombucha is a fermented tea that's made from a starter culture. Okay, and Tom has several jars of this starter culture in his apartment. Starter cultures, if you don't know what they look like a brown liquid like tea, but with this like thick film on top. It's like I don't really know how to describe it, but it's like it looks like skin. It looks like human skin is what it does. And so if he were running for office, Tom says that the thing that would totally tank his campaign is the image of his cabinets lined with these jars that look like a human skin collection. So with that, please welcome Tom Brossart.
I can honestly say I've never started a presentation this way before, so thank you. This is also kombucha, and when it doesn't have human skin on top of it, it is delicious and helps me speak to groups of people. So as I was preparing for the talk tonight, I was thinking back on St. John's, and during my first year at St. Ben St. John's, I tried out for attention-starved children. So it seems fitting that I was rejected and just hard. Joey Hamburger, I think, insulted my mom at one point, and she's in the audience tonight, so I'm happy to be here. He didn't actually do that. I apologize. Joey's wonderful. But it's great to be here at Brave New Workshop and have the chance to kind of, what's the pop culture reference? Started from the bottom, now I'm here. So good to finally get my improv out. So as I was preparing for the talk, the title was originally going to be Fermentation, E-commerce, and the Rise of the Regenerative Food System, which is a mouthful. And so I slimmed it down to be Food Awakening, because improv, like a big complicated food system, works best when you're focused on just the stories. So my story tonight is a food story and is about food awakening. It begins chapter 1, St. Ben St. John's. College experiences, as many of us have experienced, are full of two great themes, insecurity and exploration. And yes, as I was preparing for this talk, I went, I'm really going to talk about my insecurities in front of a room full of people and a webcast. So yes. So during my time at St. Ben St. John's, I got clear on 3 big insecurities in my life. Acne on my face, anxiety, and dry, itchy red eyes. And the sort of aha moment here was when I was in Thailand with the Extending the Link team. And we were in a refugee camp, and everyone was getting ready for bed. And I was putting on acne cream, and I was aware of how long I was taking doing that and the things I was thinking about. And what a strange juxtaposition it was to have spent the day recording stories about death and families, immediate, and people that had witnessed things that I still can't really integrate and process in my life. And so as I came back from that experience, and I was like, okay, these 3 insecurities are standing in the way of my connecting with the work that I was trying to do there. So how do I avoid letting that happen in the future? And I had a number of really great conversations with friends, family, and professors, read a bunch of books, and this kind of led to the start of my food awakening. One of those conversations was with my cousin Sally, and she helped me see that maybe these insecurities in my life were connected to something. Maybe they weren't just part of who I am as a person. I'm not just a person that is anxious or a person that has dry, itchy red eyes. And so she sort of gave me the first hint, and then I was sort of off and running using my Strengths Finders perspective, another St. Ben St. John's assist there, to learn. I'm really big on learning and communicating. So I started reading a lot of books, and I read What to Eat by Marion Nestle and started learning about what does organic mean, what is our food system, and the different ways that we interface with it. I read the third plate, and I started learning about all these chefs around the world that are kind of waking up to what's going on in our food system. And that kind of brings in the experimentation theme of college. And so I started my swinger lifestyle, where I cut out lactose from my diet. And I experimented with how that made me feel. And it was that first part of the journey of directly connecting that what I'm putting inside of my body, through a mouth hole, is directly impacting how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, how my skin looks. And the more I thought about that, I kind of came to a revelation that I'm interfacing with the world directly through my stomach. And that's not something that I'd really been exposed to much before. So as I continued with that idea, I read the book Wild Fermentation by Sandor Katz. And Sandor is an incredible figure. He was diagnosed with HIV, which is a much more serious condition than any of my, comparably very small insecurities. And fermentation turned out to be an absolutely critical part of both how he moved forward with his lifestyle and sort of healing his body or maintaining his body, and also how he understood the world. So for people that aren't familiar with fermentation, it is a very important biological process. It is involved in pretty much all of our favorite things in the world. You got your wine and beer and cheese and chocolate. So the list goes on and on. I could actually give a 10-minute presentation on that, which would be great. But maybe as importantly as all of these wonderful things that fermentation helps you do is the probiotic quality. So if you've been kind of listening in the last couple of years, you've probably heard a lot about the microbiome and about probiotics. And that resonated really strong with me in this part of my food awakening. And so I started making my own kombucha and making my own sauerkraut. Experimented with having a sauerkraut business with my parents. That didn't work. Great learning lesson. Because there are already a lot of good sauerkraut businesses out there, which is awesome. And so this helped me move into kind of a yes and mentality, acknowledge the specifics about the symptoms or the insecurities in my life that I didn't like, and how could I say yes and to them? So move forward rather than kind of freezing up and just going, well, better get some more benzoyl peroxide and anxiety medication because I don't know how to deal with this. And that was incredible because I saw it in Sandor Katz's story with HIV. He very much said yes and. He took a really difficult thing to live with and moved forward and is now this incredible figure and is catalyzing sort of a fermentation revolution. It's very fitting to talk about yes and because it's a really important idea in improv. So being in the Brave New Workshop tonight, the idea of working with your fellow actors and the energy from the audience and being able to move forward with the scene regardless of, maybe you're dealing with current events and pulling that in and seeing how the audience interacts with it. And so I saw that between Brave New Workshop and between my fermentation world. And then I kept expanding my view. And I saw it in areas like the pollinators and bumblebees. And it's really fascinating to look at bumblebees in particular because from an evolutionary perspective, they're not an incredible creature. They're kind of like wobbly. They don't fly super fast. But they exist in an incredible symbiotic relationship with the plants that they pollinate. And so they've thrived and lived for thousands of, not great with history, millions of years? Someone can fact check that and tweet it. And that's amazing. And so I started looking at yes and, what in nature is existing with this sort of abundance, this sort of symbiosis. And this kind of brings us more towards the end of my food awakening or my current work at Food Building and with eaterentrepreneur.com. Not only looking at my own experience and how I'm learning to nourish and heal myself, probiotic supplements and fermented foods and these things, but really zooming that out and being able to look at the food system as a whole, the way that where do I buy my food from? Who's involved in that process? And is it possible to take a really hard look at what our current food system is and kind of accept, both on an individual level and on a collective level, that it's really broken? If you've seen any documentary or read any article in the last couple of years, You've been sort of washed over with lots of information about how unsustainable, how unethical. It's very exploitative and extractive. And so as I was preparing for this talk and thinking about e-commerce, fermentation, and the rise of the regenerative food system, I really wanted to cover a lot of those things. But I kind of realized that we've all heard a lot of that before. But we need to talk more about the personal experience, the personal food awakenings. And so I encourage you all to connect your individual food experience, your food story, with the larger collective food story. So if there's something in your life, whether it's acne, anxiety, itchy red eyes, or any other symptom that might ultimately be linked to your microbiome or the things that you're eating, explore that. Be curious about it. Say yes and to your situation. And then, sort of Russian nesting doll, expand that out and say, how am I interacting with my family and friends with food? How am I interacting with my local grocery store? Or the people in Florida and Mexico and California that grow a lot of my food? So, in closing, the so what of my presentation tonight, other than talking about your insecurities in public is very therapeutic, is an invitation to look at what your own food story is. And as you look at that, to imagine what our food story could be, where are we right now, and where could we go from here? Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tom.